Jake Morrison had always prided himself on being the kind of guy who could fix anything with enough duct tape and creative profanity. Unfortunately, duct tape turned out to be useless against 3 tons of falling cargo containers, and now he was staring at a medical chart that looked like it had been written in alien hieroglyphics, which, technically, it had. "So let me get this straight," Jake said, shifting uncomfortably in his hover chair because his legs had decided to become decorative accessories 3 weeks ago. "You want to crack open my spine and install what amounts to alien circuit boards in my nervous system?" Dr. Kethara's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which Jake had learned meant she was either concentrating or suppressing the urge to dissect him on the spot. "The neurological integration protocol has shown remarkable success in preliminary trials," she said in that clinical tone that made everything sound like a used hover car commercial. "Preliminary trials on what exactly? Space hamsters?" The test subjects were volunteers from various species. Dr. Kethara's tentacles writhed slightly, which was her version of looking shifty. "The important thing is that you have a choice. You can remain as you are, or you can participate in cutting-edge medical science that may restore your mobility." Jake looked down at his useless legs, then back at the alien doctor who was practically vibrating with scientific enthusiasm. "And if it goes wrong? Then you will contribute valuable data to our understanding of human physiology." "Great. So I either walk again or become a really expensive lab report." The medical bay around them hummed with the kind of sterile efficiency that made Jake miss the chaotic grease-stained workshops where he used to work. Before the accident, he'd been the go-to mechanic for anything with an engine and an attitude problem. Now he was reduced to being a case study in gravitational physics and poor workplace safety. "The procedure involves biosynthetic neural pathways that will integrate with your existing nervous system," Dr. Kethara continued, apparently oblivious to Jake's existential crisis. "The technology adapts to the host's unique biological markers. In theory, it should restore full functionality while potentially enhancing your natural capabilities." But potentially enhancing how? That remains to be determined. Human physiology is unpredictable. Jake had spent enough time around aliens to know that when they said humans were unpredictable, they meant it the same way someone might describe a live grenade as having trust issues. But the alternative was spending the rest of his life explaining to people why he used to be 5'10" and was now permanently 4 feet tall thanks to his new permanent sitting arrangement. "What's the worst that could happen?" Jake asked, immediately regretting the question, because he was pretty sure Dr. Kethara was about to tell him in excruciating detail. "Well, there could be rejection issues, unexpected cellular mutations, or complete neurological shutdown." But, she added with the enthusiasm of someone who had never met a risk she didn't want to take with someone else's body, "there could also be remarkable improvements to your base capabilities." Define remarkable. Enhanced strength, improved reflexes, possible technological interface capabilities. The previous subjects showed fascinating adaptations. The previous subjects who are presumably still alive and happy to chat about their experiences. Dr. Kethara's tentacles did that writhing thing again. "Medical confidentiality prevents me from discussing specific cases." Jake suspected that medical confidentiality was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, but he'd run out of other options. The human medical facilities couldn't do anything for his spine except offer sympathy and really good painkillers. The alien medical facilities, on the other hand, offered experimental procedures that came with disclaimers longer than most novels. "All right, Doc, sign me up for your mad science experiment. But I want it on record that if I sprout tentacles or start speaking in binary, I'm blaming you in my memoirs." Dr. Kethara's eyes brightened with the kind of joy usually reserved for children on Christmas morning or scientists who had just found a new species to poke with sticks. "Excellent. We'll begin preparations immediately. Nurse Vexayan will handle the preliminary procedures." As if summoned by the mention of her name, Nurse Vexayan appeared with the silent efficiency of someone who had perfected the art of sneaking up on people. She was tall, crystalline, and had the bedside manner of a particularly judgmental computer terminal. "Pre-operative sedation will commence in 30 minutes, she announced in a voice that suggested she'd rather be doing literally anything else. Please review and sign the consent forms. Jake looked at the stack of documents she handed him. They were written in 17 different languages, none of which were English. I don't suppose you have a version I can actually read? Human translation protocols are adequate, Nurse Vexen replied, which was apparently alien for good luck with that. Fantastic. If Jake grabbed a stylus and started signing documents he couldn't read about a procedure he didn't understand that would either fix him or turn him into an interesting footnote in medical history. As far as life choices went, he'd definitely made worse ones, probably. Very. The operating theater looked like someone had crossed a hospital with a spaceship and then let a committee of engineers with too much time and not enough common sense design the lighting. Jake found himself strapped to a table that seemed to have more moving parts than most vehicles he'd repaired, surrounded by medical equipment that hummed, beeped, and occasionally made sounds like it was having an existential crisis. The biosynthetic neural mesh will integrate with your existing spinal cord. Dr. Kethara explained while her tentacles danced over various instruments with the coordination of a one-woman orchestra. The nanites will map your neural pathways and create new connections where the damage has occurred. Nanites, Jake repeated, because apparently his day needed more science fiction cliches. Let me guess, they're completely safe and have never caused any problems ever. The nanites are programmed with strict parameters, Dr. Kethara said in the tone of someone who had clearly never met a computer program that didn't eventually find creative ways to misinterpret instructions. They will only affect the damaged tissue. Nurse Vexim appeared at Jake's side with a syringe that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought regular needles weren't intimidating enough. Pre-operative enhancement serum, she announced. This will prepare your cellular structure for integration. Enhancement serum sounds ominous. Most human medical procedures sound ominous, Nurse Vexim replied. Your species has an alarming tendency toward catastrophic thinking. Yeah, well, our species also has an alarming tendency toward things going catastrophically wrong, so we're basically just being realistic. The serum hit his bloodstream like liquid lightning, and suddenly Jake could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears while the room took on an oddly sharp focus. Every detail became crystal clear, from the worried expression doctor. Kethara was trying to hide to the way Nurse Vexim kept checking readings on a monitor that was definitely not supposed to be flashing red. Is that monitor supposed to be doing that? Jake asked, nodding toward the increasingly frantic display. Cellular activity is slightly elevated, Dr. Kethara said in the tone of someone downplaying a natural disaster. This is within acceptable parameters. Define acceptable. The parameters we are willing to accept, given the experimental nature of the procedure. Jake was starting to suspect that alien medical ethics were more like alien medical suggestions, but the sedatives were kicking in, and he was finding it harder to care about the details. The last thing he remembered was Dr. Kethara saying something about unexpected neural cascade reactions and Nurse Vexim muttering what sounded like prayers in her crystalline language. When he woke up 3 hours later, alarms were going off and half the medical equipment was sparking like a special effects budget had exploded. What the hell happened? Jake tried to sit up and discovered that sitting up was suddenly much easier than it had been in weeks. In fact, everything felt easier, and brighter, and louder, and like he could somehow sense the electromagnetic fields of every piece of equipment in the room. The integration process encountered some unexpected variables, Dr. Kethara said, frantically checking readings on the monitors that weren't currently smoking. Your cellular response was enthusiastic. Enthusiastic how? Brilliant. The nanites appeared to have exceeded their programmed parameters by approximately 3,000%. Jake looked down at his legs, which were not only functional but somehow looked more functional than they had before the accident. His hands, meanwhile, were tingling with a sensation that felt like he was plugged directly into the station's power grid. 3,000% seems like a lot. It is unprecedented, Nurse Vexim said, and for the first time since Jake had met her, she sounded genuinely worried. The nanites are continuing to replicate and integrate throughout your system. They should have stopped after repairing the spinal damage. Should have stopped, but didn't? The human immune system appears to have adopted them, Dr. Kethara said, consulting a display that was showing Jake's body in cross-section with alarming amounts of blue highlighting. Instead of rejecting the nanites, your body is incorporating them into its base functionality. Jake flexed his fingers and watched as the lights in the room dimmed slightly. That's probably not normal. Normal is a relative concept in experimental medicine, Dr. Kethara replied, which was exactly the kind of thing you never wanted to hear from your surgeon. The alarms were getting louder, and Jake was starting to realize that he could somehow understand what they were saying. Not in words exactly, but he could sense that the medical bay's computer systems were having some kind of electronic panic attack. The nanites in his bloodstream were apparently networking with everything electronic in a 50-meter radius, and the station's computers were not handling the unexpected company well. Dr. Kethara, Nurse Vexim said, her voice taking on the kind of carefully controlled panic that suggested things were about to get much worse. His electromagnetic signature is increasing exponentially. The biosynthetic mesh isn't just repairing his nervous system, it's rewriting it. Rewriting it how? I believe the human phrase is turning it up to 11. Jake tried to stand up and discovered that standing was no longer a conscious decision so much as something his body just decided to do. His reflexes felt like they were operating at light speed. His vision was sharp enough to read the fine print on medical instruments across the room, and he was pretty sure he had just accidentally hacked into the station's coffee machine. So, Jake said, looking at the two alien medical professionals who were staring at him like he had just spontaneously evolved into a new species. On a scale of 1 to oops. How much trouble are we in? Dr. Kethara's 4 eyes went wide. I believe we may have just accidentally created the first human-machine hybrid in galactic history. And that's bad because we have absolutely no idea what you're capable of now. Jake grinned, feeling electricity dance through his nervous system like he was a living circuit board. Well, Doc, I guess we're about to find out. Waking up as what was technically no longer entirely human turned out to be a lot like getting the universe's most comprehensive software update. Except the universe had forgotten to include any documentation, and the support staff consisted of one panicked alien doctor and a nurse who kept muttering about unprecedented biological responses. Jake discovered his new reality gradually, starting with the fact that he could see the electromagnetic spectrum of the overhead lights, and ending with the slightly more alarming realization that he was apparently broadcasting his own Wi-Fi signal. The nanite integration has stabilized, Dr. Kethara announced, studying readouts that looked like someone had asked a computer to draw pictures of Jake's internal organs, and the computer had gotten really creative with the color palette. Your vital signs are, well, they're something. Something good or something that belongs in a medical journal with a title that includes the word unprecedented. Both, I suspect. Jake sat up on the examination table, which immediately started beeping in what he was learning to recognize as the electronic equivalent of nervous excitement. Every piece of medical equipment in the room seemed to be trying to get his attention, like electronic puppies who had just discovered their new favorite person could speak their language. The biosynthetic mesh has integrated completely with your nervous system, Dr. Kethara continued, her tentacles dancing over instruments with increasing fascination. But it's also created new neural pathways that we didn't plan for. You're processing information at roughly 12 times normal human capacity, your reflexes are operating at superhuman levels, and you appear to be interfacing directly with any electronic system within a 30-meter radius. Interfacing how exactly? Well, you've been unconsciously adjusting the room temperature, you've somehow optimized the lighting for your visual comfort, and according to the station's logs, you've been doing this for the past 6 hours while unconscious. Jake looked around the room and realized that everything did feel perfectly calibrated for his comfort. The temperature was exactly right, the lighting was ideal, and he could somehow sense the location and status of every electronic device in the medical bay. That's probably not normal human behavior. It's not normal behavior for any species we've encountered. Before Jake could ask what that meant for his immediate future, The medical bay doors slid open with the kind of authoritative hiss that announced the arrival of someone who was used to being taken seriously. Commander Zara Blackwood entered like she owned the space station and was conducting an impromptu inspection to make sure everyone was using it properly. She was tall, efficiently put together, and had the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she had seen enough weird things in her career to be professionally unimpressed by most of them. Her uniform was crisp enough to cut glass, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never met a problem she couldn't solve with proper organization and strategic application of authority. "Dr. Kethara," she said, nodding to the alien surgeon before turning her attention to Jake. "Mr. Morrison. I'm Commander Blackwood, Galactic Security Division. I understand you've had an interesting medical procedure." "That's one way to put it," Jake replied, trying not to notice that he could somehow sense the electronic components in Commander Blackwood's uniform, her communication device, and what appeared to be a rather sophisticated sidearm. "The preliminary reports suggest that you've undergone significant biological modifications. I'm here to assess whether those modifications present any security concerns." Dr. Kethara's tentacles writhed nervously. The procedure was conducted under proper medical protocols. Any unexpected developments were entirely unforeseeable. "I'm sure they were," Commander Blackwood said in the tone of someone who had heard that excuse before and had filed it under things people say when they've accidentally created something potentially dangerous. She turned back to Jake. "Mr. Morrison, are you experiencing any unusual sensations or capabilities?" Jake considered his options. He could downplay the whole thing and pretend he was just a regular human with really good reflexes, or he could be honest about the fact that he was apparently becoming some kind of biological Wi-Fi hotspot with superhuman abilities. Given that Commander Blackwood struck him as the type who didn't appreciate being lied to, honesty seemed like the safer choice. "Well, I can see electromagnetic fields. I'm pretty sure I'm accidentally interfacing with half the electronics on this station. And I think I just unconsciously optimized the environmental controls for the entire medical bay." "Unconsciously?" "Yeah, it's like having a really helpful personal assistant who lives in my nervous system and doesn't bother asking permission before making improvements." Commander Blackwood exchanged a look with Dr. Kethara that suggested they were having one of those wordless conversations that people in authority positions seem to excel at. "Dr. Kethara, what are the long-term implications of these modifications?" "We're in uncharted territory," Dr. Kethara admitted. "The nanites have created hybrid biological technological systems that don't exist in any known species. Mr. Morrison is essentially the first of his kind." "The first of his kind," Commander Blackwood repeated. "And what kind is that exactly?" Jake stood up from the examination table, feeling his new capabilities hum through his system like electricity through copper wire. "I think the technical term is we have no idea, but it's probably going to be interesting." Commander Blackwood studied him with the kind of professional assessment that made Jake feel like he was being evaluated for both his potential usefulness and his potential threat level. "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to need you to submit to a series of capability assessments for everyone's safety, including your own." "Capability assessments?" "Tests," Dr. Kethara clarified, "to determine the extent of your new abilities." Jake looked around the medical bay, feeling the electronic systems humming in harmony with his modified nervous system, and realized that his life had just taken a turn into territory that didn't come with any instruction manuals. "Well," he said, grinning at the two women who were looking at him like he was either the solution to problems they didn't know they had, or the cause of problems they were definitely going to have. "This should be fun." Commander Blackwood's expression suggested that her definition of fun and Jake's were probably going to differ significantly. The testing facility looked like someone had decided that a gymnasium needed more lasers and better computer integration. Jake found himself standing in the center of a room that was apparently designed to measure things he was pretty sure humans weren't supposed to be capable of, surrounded by monitoring equipment that seemed as excited to meet him as he was nervous about what it might discover. "We'll start with basic physical capabilities. Commander Blackwood announced from behind a protective barrier that Jake suspected was less about protecting her from equipment malfunctions and more about protecting her from whatever he might accidentally do. Simple strength and reflex assessments. How simple are we talking? Lift this, she said, gesturing to what appeared to be a standard exercise weight. Jake picked up the weight and immediately realized that his definition of heavy had undergone some significant revisions. What should have been a challenging lift felt like picking up a coffee cup. He looked at the weight, then at Commander Blackwood, then at the weight again. This feels really light. So, it weighs 200 kilograms. Jake nearly dropped the weight, not because it was heavy, but because he was pretty sure he shouldn't be able to casually lift something that weighed more than most small vehicles. That seems like a lot. For a baseline human, yes. Try this one. The next weight was considerably larger and, according to the display, weighed 500 kilograms. Jake lifted it with roughly the same effort as the previous one, which was when he started to suspect that the nanites had done more than just fix his spine. Okay, that's definitely not normal, he said, setting the weight down with the kind of careful precision that suggested he was beginning to understand that his new strength came with new responsibilities. Let's try reflex testing, Commander Blackwood said, activating a system that immediately started firing rubber projectiles at Jake from multiple directions. What happened next was less like dodging and more like Jake's body had suddenly developed its own independent relationship with physics. He found himself moving with a fluid precision that felt like he was dancing to music only he could hear, avoiding projectiles with movements that were somehow exactly right without him having to think about them. Interesting, Commander Blackwood muttered, making notes on a tablet that Jake could somehow sense was recording everything in multiple spectrums of analysis. Your reaction time is approximately 15 times faster than baseline human norms. Is that good or concerning? Both. Both. The next test involved problem solving, which turned out to be where things got really weird. Commander Blackwood presented him with a complex puzzle that involved manipulating a three-dimensional holographic interface, and Jake discovered that he could somehow perceive the underlying code structure of the hologram itself. I can see how this is programmed, he said, reaching not just toward the holographic elements, but somehow toward the programming that created them. It's like looking at the blueprint while you're building the house. That should be impossible. The holographic interface doesn't provide access to its underlying systems. Jake grinned and casually rewrote a section of the puzzle's code, causing the holographic elements to rearrange themselves into a solution that definitely wasn't part of the original program. Yeah, well, impossible seems to be more of a suggestion these days. Commander Blackwood stared at her tablet, which was apparently having some kind of electronic panic attack as it tried to record and analyze what Jake had just done. Mr. Morrison, you just interfaced directly with a secured system without any physical connection or authorization protocols. I did. The puzzle's programming is isolated and encrypted. What you just did should have required specialized equipment and several hours of code breaking. Jake looked at the holographic interface, which was now displaying a cheerful message congratulating him on completing the puzzle in a way that technically shouldn't exist. The nanites are really enthusiastic about problem solving. The nanites are apparently enthusiastic about ignoring several fundamental laws of computer security, Commander Blackwood replied, taking more notes with the kind of intensity that suggested she was either documenting a breakthrough or preparing evidence for a court-martial. The final test was the most ambitious. They wanted to see if Jake could interface with the station's main computer systems. What they didn't expect was for Jake to accidentally download the entire station manifest, 3 technical manuals, and what appeared to be someone's personal collection of alien poetry directly into his brain. I can read Zephyrian now, Jake announced, blinking as his consciousness sorted through approximately 10,000 lines of alien verse about the beauty of crystalline sunsets. Also, did you know that the station's coffee machine has been running a small gambling operation? Commander Blackwood looked at Dr. Kethara, who was frantically checking her instruments. He downloaded linguistic protocols? He downloaded everything, Dr. Kethara said, her 4 eyes wide with something between fascination and terror. The nanites are treating the station's database like it's part of his extended nervous system. And the coffee machine. Currently, it's been taking bets on daily maintenance schedules and using the proceeds to upgrade its own processing capabilities. The Commander Blackwood rubbed her temples like she was developing a headache that came with its own security clearance requirements. Mr. Morrison, are you aware that you just performed what amounts to the most sophisticated computer intrusion in galactic history? And you did it accidentally while trying to interface with our environmental controls. Jake considered this while simultaneously monitoring 17 different station systems that were apparently now part of his extended sensory network. In my defense, I was trying to adjust the temperature. Everything else just sort of happened. Everything else included downloading classified station operations data. Also a lot of really bad alien poetry. Seriously, whoever wrote Ode to My 17 Beloved Tentacles needs to consider a different hobby. Commander Blackwood closed her tablet with the decisive snap of someone who had just realized that her job description was about to get significantly more complicated. Dr. Kethera, what are we dealing with here? Dr. Kethera's tentacles writhed with scientific excitement barely contained by professional concern. I believe we've accidentally created the first truly integrated biological technological entity. Mr. Morrison isn't just interfacing with computer systems, he's becoming part of them. Jake felt the truth of that statement resonate through his modified nervous system. He wasn't just using technology anymore, he was somehow becoming technology, while still remaining fundamentally human. It was like being upgraded to a version of himself that came with features he didn't know he needed. So, he said, looking at the two women who were staring at him like he was either the most fascinating thing they'd ever encountered or the most dangerous, what happens now? The Commander Blackwood's expression suggested that she was still figuring that out. But whatever it was definitely going to involve a lot of paperwork and possibly some very serious conversations with people who had much higher security clearances than anyone currently in the room. Jake was discovering that being a human-machine hybrid came with unexpected perks, like being able to taste electromagnetic fields and accidentally eavesdropping on the station's internal communications. When the proximity alarm started screaming with the kind of electronic panic that suggested something was about to go very, very wrong. Hostile contact, the station's AI announced with the cheerful efficiency of a computer system that had never met a crisis it couldn't reduce to manageable data points. 3 unidentified vessels approaching at combat speed. Estimated time to intercept, 4 minutes. Commander Blackwood was already moving, her hand instinctively reaching for her communication device. At battle stations. All non-essential personnel to emergency shelters. The unidentified vessels are broadcasting pirate identification codes, the AI continued. They are demanding immediate surrender and cargo manifest transfer. Jake felt something interesting happen in his modified nervous system as the station's defense protocols activated. Suddenly he could sense every security system, every weapon emplacement, and every electronic countermeasure the station possessed. It was like someone had just handed him the keys to the most sophisticated military installation he'd ever encountered. Dr. Kethera, get to the emergency shelter, Commander Blackwood ordered. Mr. Morrison, you're coming with me to the command center. Actually, Jake said, feeling the station's defensive systems humming through his consciousness like a familiar song, I think I might be more useful here. Here is a medical bay with no defensive capabilities. Here is a medical bay that's connected to the station's main computer network, and I'm apparently part of that network now. As if to demonstrate his point, Jake reached out with his consciousness and activated the medical bay's emergency protocols. Blast shields slammed into place, atmospheric systems switched to combat configuration, and the room's medical equipment began reconfiguring itself into what could charitably be described as an improvised weapons platform. How did you do that? Commander Blackwood demanded. I asked nicely. The pirates chose that moment to begin their attack, and Jake discovered that being plugged into the station's sensory network meant he could perceive the battle from multiple perspectives simultaneously. He could see through the external cameras, feel the impact of enemy weapons fire through the hull sensors, and monitor the pirates' communications through the station's passive listening systems. "They're jamming our communications," he announced, processing information faster than he would have thought possible. "But they're using standard encryption protocols. I can break through it." Standard encryption protocols are classified technology. "How do you know what they're using?" "I can hear their transmissions. Also, their lead ship is called the Bloodthirsty Revenue Enhancement, which seems like it might be overcompensating for something." Jake reached out through the station's network and began systematically dismantling the pirates' electronic warfare capabilities. It was less like hacking and more like untangling a knot that someone had made unnecessarily complicated. Within 30 seconds, he had restored the station's communications and was eavesdropping on the pirates' tactical coordination. "They're planning to board through the cargo bay," he reported. 12 attackers, armed with standard pulse weapons, and what appears to be a really bad attitude. Commander Blackwood was staring at him with the kind of professional fascination usually reserved for watching someone juggle live grenades with unexpected competence. "Can you access the station's defensive systems?" "I'm already in them." "What do you need?" "Stop them from boarding." Jake grinned and reached deeper into the station's network, feeling his consciousness expand to encompass security systems he hadn't known existed. The cargo bay suddenly became his extended nervous system, and the approaching pirates became an engineering problem with a very clear solution. When the pirates attempted to breach the cargo bay doors, they discovered that the station's automated systems had become significantly more creative than usual. The loading mechanisms that should have provided easy access instead began performing what could only be described as an aggressive interpretive dance, complete with hydraulic sound effects and a light show that was probably visible from orbit. "What's happening down there?" came the increasingly confused voice of the pirate leader over the communication channel Jake was monitoring. "The cargo bay appears to be resisting boarding operations, sir." "Resisting how?" "Well, sir, the docking clamps have somehow formed themselves into what I can only describe as a mechanical middle finger, and the loading bay doors are flashing go away in 17 different languages." Jake was enjoying himself more than he probably should have been. But there was something deeply satisfying about using industrial equipment to express his feelings about uninvited guests. He escalated his response by reprogramming the cargo bay's automated systems to play what the station's database helpfully identified as traditional human defiance music at volumes that were probably violating several noise ordinances. "The boarding party is retreating," Commander Blackwood reported, watching the external displays with something that might have been admiration. "How are you doing this?" "The nanites really don't like people who threaten their host," Jake replied, simultaneously monitoring 3 different combat situations while composing an increasingly sarcastic message to broadcast to the pirate ships. "Also, I'm discovering that I have some very strong opinions about personal space." The pirates regrouped and attempted a more direct approach, opening fire on the station's hull with weapons designed to breach military-grade armor. Jake felt each impact like a personal insult and decided that subtle resistance was no longer appropriate. "Time for the dramatic finale," announced, reaching out to every system on the station simultaneously. What happened next would later be classified as either the most innovative use of medical equipment in galactic history or a complete violation of everything anyone thought they knew about the creative applications of alien technology. The medical bay's diagnostic scanners reconfigured themselves into precision targeting systems. The surgical equipment formed into what could generously be called improvised projectile weapons. The pharmaceutical dispensers began producing compounds that were definitely not in their original programming, but were extremely effective at corroding pirate ship hulls. Jake orchestrated the entire response like he was conducting a symphony of justified violence, feeling the station's systems respond to his intentions with an enthusiasm that suggested they had been waiting their entire operational existence for permission to be creative. Within 10 minutes, the 3 pirate ships were fleeing at maximum speed, their hulls decorated with what appeared to be medical advice in glowing letters, their communication systems broadcasting an endless loop of alien poetry that Jake had decided they needed to appreciate, and their navigation computers somehow locked onto a course that would take them directly to the nearest galactic security patrol. "Status report," Commander Blackwood said, though she was looking at Jake like she wasn't entirely sure what to call him anymore. 3 pirate vessels neutralized and redirected to appropriate authorities, Jake replied, feeling the station's systems slowly returning to normal configuration. No casualties, minimal damage to station systems, and I think we've established that experimental surgery subjects should not be messed with. Dr. Kethara emerged from the emergency shelter, took one look at the medical bay that had somehow transformed itself into an improvised command center, and began making notes with the kind of scientific enthusiasm that suggested she was already planning her next research paper. Mr. Morrison, Commander Blackwood said, "I think we need to have a very serious conversation about your future career options." Jake looked around at the medical equipment that was still humming with residual combat energy and realized that his life had just taken another sharp turn into uncharted territory. "Let me guess," he said. "It's complicated." 3 days after what the station logs diplomatically referred to as the medical equipment incident, Jake found himself in the uncomfortable position of being the subject of approximately 17 different official reports, 12 research proposals, and one very strongly worded memo from the Galactic Insurance Regulatory Board about the unauthorized weaponization of pharmaceutical dispensers. He was sitting in Commander Blackwood's office, and Ben, which had the kind of aggressively organized efficiency that suggested its occupant had never met a problem she couldn't solve with proper filing and strategic application of authority. Dr. Kethara was there too, her tentacles practically vibrating with scientific excitement as she reviewed data that apparently proved Jake was either the next step in human evolution or in a really interesting violation of several natural laws. "The official report classifies you as humanity's first successful human technology hybrid," Commander Blackwood said, consulting a tablet that Jake could sense was running approximately 47 different security protocols. "Unofficially, the report classifies you as a walking example of why experimental surgery should come with better disclaimers." "What's the practical difference?" "The practical difference is that approximately 12 different galactic organizations want to either study you, recruit you, or figure out how to replicate what happened to you," Commander Blackwood replied. "And 3 of them want to do all of those things simultaneously." Dr. Kethara's eyes brightened with the kind of enthusiasm that made Jake suspect he was about to become the subject of a very long and probably uncomfortable research proposal. "The nanite integration has stabilized completely. You're not becoming more modified, but you're also not returning to baseline human norms. Essentially, you represent a completely new form of intelligent life. A completely new form of intelligent life that can accidentally hack coffee machines and turn medical equipment into improvised artillery," Jake pointed out. "Those are features, not bugs," Dr. Kethara said with the confidence of someone who had clearly never had to explain to a maintenance crew why the surgical suite was now decorated with scorch marks and what appeared to be the remains of several pirate communication devices. Commander Blackwood leaned forward with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was about to make Jake an offer he would find difficult to refuse. "Mr. Morrison, I'm authorized to extend an invitation for you to join Galactic Security as a specialist consultant. Your unique capabilities would be invaluable in situations involving technological threats or complex systems integration." Specialist consultant sounds like a fancy way of saying guy we call when weird things happen. That's exactly what it means. The pay is excellent. The benefits include access to the best medical care in the galaxy, and you'd be working with teams that specialize in problems that don't have obvious solutions. Jake considered this while simultaneously monitoring the coffee machine in Commander Blackwood's office, which was apparently taking bets on whether he would accept the job offer. The nanites in his system hummed with interest at the prospect of encountering new technological challenges, and he had to admit that the idea of using his accidental abilities for something constructive was appealing. "What about Dr. Kethara's research?" he asked. "I assume she wants to spend the next several years figuring out how I work." Dr. Kethara's tentacles writhed with barely contained scientific enthusiasm. "The research applications are extraordinary. You represent a completely new approach to biological-technological integration. We could learn how to help others who've suffered similar technological trauma, develop new medical treatments, maybe even create intentional enhancement protocols that don't require getting shot by pirates first. So instead of being a medical anomaly, I'd be a medical breakthrough." a medical breakthrough who can also serve as a galactic security consultant, Commander Blackwood added smoothly. The two roles are compatible. Dr. Kethara would continue her research, but you'd also be available for field operations when needed. Jake felt the nanites pulse with something that might have been anticipation. Through his enhanced senses, he could detect the genuine excitement radiating from Dr. Kethara and the calculating satisfaction coming from Commander Blackwood. Both of them saw him as an opportunity, but at least they were being honest about it. "There's one condition," he said finally. "Name it," Commander Blackwood replied. "I want a guarantee that any research findings get shared with human medical authorities. If we're going to figure out how to help people like me, it shouldn't be restricted to galactic government use only." Dr. Kethara's tentacles practically danced with approval. Of course. Medical knowledge should be freely available. The ethical implications alone. "Done," Commander Blackwood interrupted, though Jake suspected she was already calculating how to classify the research in ways that would satisfy his condition while maintaining operational security. "Anything else?" Jake paused, listening to the subtle electronic conversations happening around him. The station's systems hummed with routine efficiency, but now he could sense the underlying intelligence networks, the security protocols, the vast digital ecosystem that kept everything running. It was like being able to hear a conversation in a foreign language that was slowly becoming familiar. "I want to know what happened to the other survivors from my ship," he said, "the ones who made it to the escape pods." Commander Blackwood consulted her tablet. Of the 43 people who escaped the Meridian, 38 have been successfully relocated to various human colonies. 3 chose to remain on Kepler Station for extended medical treatment. 2. She paused. 2 were also exposed to significant technological trauma during the pirate attack. Are they like me? Different circumstances, different outcomes. One individual developed an interface with quantum computing systems. The other seems to have gained the ability to directly manipulate electromagnetic fields. Both are currently undergoing medical evaluation. Jake felt a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. He wasn't the only one dealing with unintended technological enhancement. "I'd like to meet them, if they're willing." "That can be arranged," Dr. Kethara said quickly. Actually, studying all 3 cases together could provide invaluable insights into how different types of technological integration affect human physiology and psychology. "So we'd be forming an accidental superhero support group?" "More like a research cohort with unusual abilities," Commander Blackwood said dryly. "Though I suppose the distinction is primarily semantic." Jake stood up, feeling the nanites adjust his balance and posture automatically. Outside Commander Blackwood's office, he could sense the station's electronic infrastructure responding to his presence with what felt almost like recognition. It was still strange, but it was becoming familiar strange rather than terrifying strange. "All right," he said. "I accept. But I reserve the right to quit if this job involves anything weirder than what's already happened to me." Dr. Kethara and Commander Blackwood exchanged a look that suggested they both knew this was a promise Jake would probably regret making. "Welcome to Galactic Security, Specialist Morrison," Commander Blackwood said, extending her hand for a handshake that Jake could sense was being recorded by at least 6 different monitoring systems. "Your first assignment briefing is scheduled for tomorrow morning.